You're listening to On Mission with Dr. Matt Davis, a podcast designed to explore the personal mission of everyday leaders. Hear from men and women who are making a difference in their corner of the world and discover what keeps them on mission.
Welcome to On Mission with Dr. Matt Davis. I'm Jonathan Sheely. Our guest today is Tim Morgan, CEO of Genesis Marketing and Palmetto Fortis Marketing. Tim and his wife Michelle live in Greer, South Carolina. They have 3 children and 6 grandchildren. Tim's first job was at a small fish camp and bait shop in Monticello, Indiana. He enjoys Texas brisket and his favorite meal, and his hobbies include golf and helping small business owners. His favorite sports team is the Dallas Cowboys. Tim, welcome to the podcast.
Cowboys?
Yeah.
America's team.
America's team.
Remember when the stadium used to have like the window on top and they said that's
why God to look down.
Yeah, God to watch his favorite team. Yeah, okay. They don't have that anymore, though, do they?
Now the whole top opens so you can see the entire field.
Oh, how nice. And a huge scoreboard that it's actually too low and the ball bounces off of every once in a while. It seemed like there was a design flaw in a billion-dollar facility like that. Well, I told you before, I am just really looking forward to talking to you, and this is one I've been hoping to schedule for a long time. You and I have been friends for a number of years, and our friendship really started on the golf course. And so is there, you mentioned golf in the bio as your hobby, and I don't know if hobby is really the right word for it. Obsession.
Side passion.
Passion.
Yeah.
I don't know. I got a new driver.
Torture, torment. There's a lot of terms for it.
I got a new driver for Christmas, and I haven't even taken it out of the plastic yet. Obviously, it snowed even yet today. But I am just dying to get out there and hit it because it's going to fix everything.
Absolutely.
Right?
Exactly.
The next new club
it
is
does
the
every
thing.
time.
Yeah.
For the first 2 holes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. You're
and
a
then
new
I'll
man.
be back.
You're a new man.
Whenever I have a new driver, I always leave the old driver in the bag for like 2 seasons, because when you start getting frustrated with the new one, it's always good to go back to the old reliable. So we've played some nice courses together.
Yes, we have.
And had the opportunity to do that. But is there a course that really stands out as your favorite that you've gotten to play?
My favorite course, I play a lot at the Cliffs there in South Carolina.
That is a beautiful course.
And I'd have to say Glassy Mountain. Glassy's on the top of the mountain. I don't know if you played Glassy.
No, I don't think so.
When we played, we were at Valley.
I'm available to
and
do that.
just so you know, I don't know if you guys know this, but Matt's a little competitive.
Listen,
there's a hole.
I think this isn't about me. All right,
there's a hole, and
he wants to win.
Matt can hit the ball a long way, and this hole has a stream that's 300 yards, 310 yards out there. And we got up to the tee box, and I was like, "Hey, Matt, my son cleared that stream by 20 yards." And so Matt gets up there, and first ball didn't quite make it. Second ball, he kind of pulled it. Third ball got across the stream. Didn't get across, didn't get all the way onto the other fairway, but it got across the stream. And he turned around and said, "Yeah." And I said, "Yeah, my son didn't clear that stream." But it was a lot of fun. It was great watching him come out of his shoes.
I did a little bit of a tin cup routine on that one, but
yeah.
And we've had some fun. I remember coming around the corner at one of those courses in Florida and seeing a big old alligator sitting on the side of the water. And, of course, we don't have a lot of those in Illinois where I grew up. And so I'm giving a wide berth. And Tim's like, "Oh, let's go mess with him," And I'm thinking, are you crazy? I don't have to explain this to your wife,
Well, I got a picture.
Yeah.
I have the picture with me in those ridiculous shorts that my wife hates, holding a golf ball standing next to that gator, ready to run at any moment. But
we won't say what happened right after you hit the picture, but
But yeah, Glassy is on top of the mountain, and on a clear day, it's just the views are amazing. One hole is a par 3, and when you look down at the end of it, it used to be a jump-off spot for parasailers.
Oh, it's that high.
So it's that high.
Yeah.
And then one time we were playing a hole at the very top of the mountain, and we heard helicopters, and they were Apaches, and they were actually flying below us. We walked over to the rim and looked down, and the
Whoa.
Apaches
Yeah.
were flying. And I'm like, where have you ever played golf that you got to look down on the helicopters?
Yeah.
That's
So that's
awesome.
my favorite course.
I just
But-
heard business trip, by the way.
Oh, well,
Come on.
could be
Well, yeah,
like
we
a
can justify
team
that.
building or
Team
something.
build- well, hey, we just take
talk
on
about
mission on the
sales,
road.
talk about recruitment, student
That
recruitment.
could be the ultimate on mission.
Yeah.
You know, I actually played at a course in Denver, and well, it's north of Denver, and it's in the Rockies. And one of the holes had a sign that said, "This is the highest tee box in North America, Canada included." And it was the highest tee box there. And I don't remember the name of the course now. It was not that expensive or interesting of a course, but they had that claim to fame. And it was a par 3, and the hole itself was only about 85 yards, but it was like
Straight
300 yards straight down, and you could hardly even see the green down below. So you just hit a lob wedge, like half a lob wedge, and hope you end up on the green. But then you
That's kind of a bummer.
take
I
the
mean,
stairs
You'd
down.
think
You're
it'd be
at-
hard to maintain that green.
well,
right?
you're
'Cause
at
it-
altitude.
Yeah.
I mean, for a guy like him, it's like, hey, here comes a 350-yard drive. The ball carries
there,
farther.
there were holes like
and they
that.
put it on
yeah.
a par 3, of course.
Yeah, they did.
It's
Put
kind
it
of a sixth sense of humor right there.
It is.
Well, you know that you don't get into golf course design unless you were also thinking, maybe
Yes.
I'll be a dentist, maybe I'll be like work for the CIA and torture people,
That's
or
true.
maybe I'll be a golf course designer.
That's-
they all the same
That's true.
mentality.
No, that's totally true.
So, Jonathan's going to hit you with a deep question right here at the beginning of our conversation. I think that'll kind of set the stage for where things go from there.
Yeah, we always ask all our guests on the On Mission podcast, what is your personal mission in life?
That's actually a great question. And it's my life verse. And I think one of the things, people are like changing life verses at different stages in life. But it was started in college, and it's whatsoever you do it heartily as to the Lord and not unto men. Mm-hmm. And I've thought through different stages of my life, do I change that? But it's always applied. Because, the other thing, business is kind of one of my hobbies too.
Yeah.
I actually enjoy talking business. My poor wife learned that early on that, we go out to a romantic dinner and somehow we end up talking business during part of the dinner. I talk business with my kids. I have, as we say, 3 adult children, and I work with one of them has his own music company. I work with Adam and his company. And then the other 2, we co-own and work in a business ourselves. And then I work with my son-in-law also. So they're kind of stuck with me. But I've just always felt that's my mission. And basically in everything, do it for the Lord and not for myself. And that's not as easy as it sounds.
There's 4 elements to the short verse. And really the first phrase says, and whatsoever you do. So that's really broad. And you haven't needed to change it, even though your life has changed really
Right.
dramatically over the years, because whatsoever is whatsoever. And, I could see how that's a good thing to adopt in as a mission statement, because it's kind of like whatever, Lord. And one of the things that Dr. Gibbs used to preach about when we were on the road was, really, really giving to the Lord whatever. And he always made the point, you've got to say yes before you know what it is.
Mm-hmm.
You got to say yes to the Lord, and Lord, whatever, whenever, and then you find out what that's really all about. So the commitment that comes in, and that's what we mean. Sometimes we use the word trust in an uncertain future. And your life has certainly seen a few whatsoevers along the way.
Definitely.
What was your original career path out of college?
Well, to go along with that, think of my poor wife. Okay, her dad, she grew up in the same house in Garland, Texas, from the time I think she was 3 all the way through college.
Okay.
Her dad had the same job that entire time. Very stable, very stable environment, never moved. Then she married me. And coming out of college, I knew I was going into business. I was looking at different options. And I ended up going to Texas to get into real estate. And that lasted for about a week until I realized the guy that hired me, it was commission only. And I'm not a commission. I'm in sales, but I'm not a commission-only salesperson. I figured there's some value there. And so ended up, through a series of events, the Lord put me into technology. My major was business in college. My minor, I had almost a dual minor. I was technology and English.
Which makes sense to somebody.
Which is really funny when you realize how bad a writer I am. But that's beside the point. And so it's my senior year.
Just imagine how bad you'd have been if you didn't minor in English.
I know. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And so it's my senior year, last semester, getting married. You either take assembler and you have, basically an IT minor, or business writing. And I was a fervent believer in strong character and doing the right thing. So I took business writing. The easiest A in college, and then spent the next 25 years in high tech using IT, which God does have a sense of humor. But no, we moved to Dallas. So I ended up getting into software development, hardware development. And he took me a path into a multi-billion-dollar company that was called Northern Telecom, which was, think AT&T of Canada. And it was an amazing period in our lives. We were at a very good church there. And through that whole series of events, though, we started having children. And we had 3 kids by the time we were 26. So, I had to move very quickly in my career to afford the kids. And he gave me a lot of upward mobility. I had a lot of really good opportunities to move up. The church we were in, though, we weren't comfortable with the direction of the church. Not that it wasn't a good church, but it wasn't right for us. So we actually started a church. So when you have people that move to an area and say, I can't find a good church, there's not a good church, there's always an option. You can start your own church. And it was really fun because we met this guy, and I'm like, this is the smartest guy I've ever met. And he wanted to start a church. And his name was Kevin Bowder. And so we helped plant a church with Kevin Bowder while we were in Texas.
Okay. I didn't know that connection.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah. And that was a wonderful 4 years of experience we had there working with Kevin. And then through that, so we were in Texas about 12 years. And it came to the point where I'd felt the call to move back to the East Coast. I miss trees. Okay.
Yep.
That's why I'm a Cowboys fan, by the way.
Oh,
because I actually lived in Dallas.
Makes sense.
And why I like Texas brisket.
Well, everyone should like Texas brisket.
Yes. And so prayed for a long time. The Lord didn't open any doors to move back to the East. Literally, Northern Telecom, more than one time I was actually offered jobs in the Raleigh area or in the Atlanta area. And it was really interesting. I would tell people I actually had offers, but every time they fell through. And I said, if God wants to keep you somewhere, he can shut down $1 billion company real quick. And it was his will. I mean, we were praying for his will. Then out of nowhere, a job comes, and we ended up moving to Atlanta to a small company where I took a senior position. And there again, God's timing was perfect because that was the perfect opportunity for us to plug into a local church there that had a huge impact on my family.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the church where my kids grew up. It was really exciting. Danny Sweat was the pastor there.
Yep.
Yeah.
His kids have come here.
Yes.
And we've had good relationship. That's a fantastic church. And so this would have been what time frame?
1997.
90s? Mid-90s?
Yeah, mid-90s.
Yeah. And so the business is starting to see some success, and you're finding leadership opportunities, or what's happening?
I had moved into leadership,
so
side? Business. I had a lot of success in Dallas. I mean, I was a director at MCI. If you've ever heard of MCI, I'd moved to director. I was director by the time I was thinking.
Nobody even knows what long distance is anymore.
I know. Back then it was impressive. Now people are like, MC what?
Yeah.
Well, it was really good at one time. But I was a director, I think, at 31 at MCI. And then when we moved to Atlanta, it was a small business. And everything looked great. It was a vice president. Salary was great. The only thing was, it wasn't quite what they told me. believe it or not, sometimes people will not tell you the truth.
Uh-oh.
And I did everything to validate everything. So we moved to Atlanta, and we did something I heard you talk about, which is very wise. My parents said, before you buy a house, you need to pick your church.
Yep.
And there were churches all over Atlanta. So we visited around, and that's how we found, Berean. And we bought a house. The back, our porch looked at Danny Sweat's front door. And it was 5 minutes from the church. And we did that intentionally because the kids were small. And I knew in my career, we need to be close enough. Michelle could get the kids to church on Wednesday night on time. And then I would get there because Atlanta traffic was horrible.
Oh, tell me. I know.
Well, the company I went to ended up, they were in desperate straits. I did not know it till after I'd started. And so for the next year, I was working probably 80 hours a week to save the business. And through a series of events, we were able to save it.
That's not the family situation that you were hoping for when
No,
you
not at
made
all.
that move.
Not at all. But because we were there, it allowed the kids to be in, all the services. And because of that, it really forced me to prioritize a lot of things in my life. Up till then, I was the young, cocky, rising executive, had my life first, do it heartily as to the Lord and not unto men, but I was enjoying getting some of the credit for that, which he gets all the credit. He gives you all your abilities. Sometimes we forget that and think it's us, but it's not. And I'll never forget, it was kind of the joke, are the kids calling me Uncle Daddy yet? Because I wasn't at home. And so I set priorities and started setting boundaries. And the boundaries were, I did not work. I was at home Saturday and Sunday, period. During the week, because of the location, because of the drive, I knew I was going to have to work long hours. And I knew when we were 15 minutes or 15 miles from my office. And in Atlanta, that could be an hour and a half drive.
Yeah.
So I knew it was going to impact my ability to get there on time, sometimes on Wednesday nights. But, basically Saturdays and Sundays became non-negotiables because I needed that time with my family, with my kids. We did yard work. We did fun things on Saturdays. Sundays was the Lord's Day. We spent time together. And that became, my kids to this day, they'll remember that that was the family rule.
Right.
Even church. There were a lot of times churches would plan a lot of activities on Saturday. If it worked, I'd go, but like men's events and things like that, I'd have to say, I got to be home with the kids. So I had to make some of those decisions too, and say there's sometimes I had to say, I got to be home with my family because I'll be at church tomorrow all day with you guys.
Yeah, sometimes we can end up feeling a little guilty about the things that we say no to because as you grow older and as your family expands, the sky's the limit on the types of things that you could do. Whether it's a pancake breakfast or it's a stakeout or, it's a thing in the community. And, people are always throwing opportunities at you. You've got to be willing to say no and then just leave it alone. And sometimes people say no to things and then they live with regret about all the things they didn't do. You just kind of set your priorities in place, make decisions based on those priorities, and I've never been the type to really look back after that. Just okay, that's the decision. It was the best thing at the time, and I'm not going to second guess it. So even in your move, you might have had the temptation to do that. Like, these turkeys didn't tell me that things are so bad. But this is where God brought us, and now you look back. And maybe now you have a little different perspective on it to realize, God was doing something a little bigger than I even knew at the time.
Definitely.
Because you probably, in working so hard, you learned a lot during that time. I mean, you weren't just seeing professional success. You were growing in your own leadership capacity. I mean, now you're a leader of leaders. But at that time, you were a leader yourself, and now you have so much to offer really because of the investment of your time and energy into that and your willingness to take on the challenge. Sounds like an extraordinary challenge.
Oh, and it was a great challenge because it was a small business. And I mean, you learn a lot real quick. It all when I say it falls, God puts that on your shoulders. He doesn't give you anything you can't handle, but he can stretch you.
He doesn't give you anything he can't handle. But, there's plenty that we can't handle.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
And I know that's what you meant. But it's – I don't know if people understand the pressure that's on leadership. Mm-hmm. You go home to your family, but the pressure of your family is still on you when you're at work.
Right.
And you're thinking about both of those things all the time, and the burden of you have these coworkers and these folks that are depending on your success, and that can be an anxious moment. And I think a lot of people deal with the stress and anxiety of that, and if you don't have the Lord to rely upon, you end up turning to maybe some destructive crutches that we see a lot of people in our society getting into, whether it's substance abuse or addictions of one kind or another, or even just the breakdowns that we've seen a lot lately. I hate to see that, especially somebody in ministry that's ministered faithfully a long time, and then all of a sudden just, whoa, crash and burn, and you say, what happened? Well, I think we get in our own strength a little bit on that.
Totally.
And we're not relying on the Lord, and then we don't really have. You can do that for a while. I don't know how long a while is for any given person, but in your own strength, you can kind of gut it out, whether it's weeks or months or whatever. But eventually, you just dry up inside. And I don't know if we've all probably had times of life where we've had more or less in that feeling or that vein, but that's what you look back on and say, the Lord was with me and sustaining me through that in ways I didn't maybe even appreciate at the time.
Right.
So tell me how or how you decided. I mean, you're not there anymore, so at some point you must have moved on to the next level. How did that happen, or how did it become apparent to you that it was time to go?
Well, back to the Lord just led us.
Yeah.
I was just talking to one of my presentations earlier today. Too many times, follow your heart. You got to follow your heart. You have to find exactly what God wants. And you know what? He leads you. And He puts the desire in your heart. It's not like you have this desire and then God fulfills it. God gives you the desire that you fulfill if you pray and ask Him. So anyway, that little company, we did turn it around. Had a really good team with me. We got bought. We got bought by a $500 million company. And through that, I took on senior level executive responsibilities. Worked there for a couple of years. The Lord opened another opportunity, so I went to a large call center company in Atlanta and became their chief information officer. And it was pretty interesting. Within 6 months, I was the COO. And that company it was a turnaround. They'd had like 20 profitable years, 2 bad years. We turned it around profitable. Then they sold. And they were public. And when they first sold, I was very excited because I was going to be very wealthy because I was senior executive, lots of shares, lots of stock options. And 2 companies were vying for us. And the company that I wanted to get us got it. And I was all excited. Then we got a notification, the attorneys were supposed to notify the board 72 hours ago. They only notified them 48 hours before, so we have to wait another 72 hours. Well, in the 72 hours, we had one owner that owned 51% of the stock. He flipped to the other company.
No.
Same price. Everything looked the same. The difference was they did the deal. You have a 60-day blackout period in a public company, a lot to this, that I, as a named executive, couldn't sell my stock, or I would have sold it that day. By the end of the 60th day, all my stock was underwater.
Oh, no.
So, long story short, the company was I call them vulture capitalists. Basically, It was a company that bought companies. They were buying .coms, and they were bankrupting them for their assets.
Their parts, yeah.
And then they were going to buy them out of bankruptcy so they were using a fund to buy them, bankrupt them, and they were going to use their own money to buy them out of bankruptcy. We were the brick and mortar. We were a $100 million call center company, and we were going to be the flagship. Well, now I'm the COO of this thing. I actually worked there all the way to bankruptcy.
Wow.
They bankrupted it. Then they called me. So this is in Atlanta. And they said, okay, we'd like you to run this. Told me the plan. This is what we're doing. We're going to buy it. And I said, there's no ad work for you. You just bankrupted the company. And I go, well, you've been working for us. I said, well, I had a contract. Once you bankrupted, that contract's null and void. So now I'm gone. And so they said, okay. So they fired me. So they fired me that day. And it would be interesting.
Fire me, I quit.
The interesting thing is, now here's how the Lord works. The next day I get a call from an investment firm in California. They're like, we want to buy that company out of bankruptcy. You ran it, didn't you? Yeah. Can you help us? We'll pay you to help us. And I'm like, sure, I'd love to do that. And even though the other group was a stalking horse, you know what that is, we got it. We got the asset. Within 90 days, we got that asset out of bankruptcy. So now I'm back running the asset again. And it was really interesting. This is going to sound horrible. I got to terminate the guy that terminated me. My name was still on the door. So I got to go walk into my previous office, had my name on the door, and say, I'm back. And he was like, so that, and I didn't even have to say that. He said, so that means I'm gone. And I said, yeah. I said, sorry. And he said, okay. And he had never taken my name. So I did thank him for not taking my name off the door.
Yeah.
Well,
you knew how to run the thermostat in the office.
Exactly. So this is where it gets really interesting. God's got this whole plan. While I was unemployed for that period of time, Mike Buter called me and said, what are you doing? And I said, I'm cutting my grass. I'm cutting it like it looks like a baseball stadium. I was cutting multiple angles. And Buter said, you need to write a book called Pleading for Leading While Weeding.
There you go.
But anyway.
I think every one of us that have spent a long time mowing have thought about writing a book about mowing. I've actually thought about I should write a book about mowing.
Exactly.
I've sketched out chapters. I'm not even kidding.
So we come out of bankruptcy, and I was, part of the executive team, and we put this plan together. And the plan was we're going to buy our biggest competitor. And because I've got this, I got $1 billion venture fund. Let's think big. Let's have fun. And so the way the Lord worked it out, we had done such a good job of maintaining our customers, even through the bankruptcy, of customer service, that we were a year and a half ahead of plan. We thought it would take us a year and a half to get back to basically full revenue. We were at full revenue at 6 months. Our customers were so happy we were back. And our technology was used behind the firewall virtually in every bank. It was collections. And so the banks needed the technology. So they bought our biggest competitor. Then they called me up and said, everything's great. This plan has worked out marvelously. But the other team has multi-million-dollar contracts. And so if we terminate them or don't let them keep their positions, we're going to have to pay them millions. We didn't quite get your contract done yet. So we'd like you to be the chief information officer and move to Boston. And I just remember thinking Gabriel would have to appear at the foot of my bed for me to want to move to Boston. And it's like, because I believe God puts the desire in your heart. And I had no desire to move to Boston. And I'll never forget sitting on the foot of my bed, and I'm praying out loud, and my wife's in the other room. And I just said, Lord, I'm thick. I know you're doing something here. Yeah. I know you want something to happen. And the next day the phone rings and my wife answers it, and she answers, said, hello? Yeah. Oh, and she covers the phone and said, I did not call him. And I'm like, what? And she said, just answer. It was a friend of mine from a sister ministry that used to be located up here, and they were looking for a director of IT. And would I come up and look at their ministry? So I came up, looked at their ministry. It wasn't a right fit, but I was able to help them with a lot of their, it was a lot of fun. It was actually fun. It was refreshing. And through that, I met Bob Wood.
A little bit of a step down for you, wouldn't it, to be IT director at a small college?
Well, by the time we got through, they offered me more than that. But it was like they had the right staff at the time. Yeah. And through that, though, they said, Bob Wood is looking for someone at Bob Jones and BJU Press.
Yeah.
And so, long story short, the Lord used that to put me in Greenville, and there for about 4 years I ran the business side of Bob Jones down in Greenville. And I look back now and I see exactly what the Lord, part of my mission statement is also, as to the Lord, not unto men, but it's also making disciples, because I believe that's what we're supposed to be doing. Mm-hmm. This whole leader to leader, it's making disciples. If a leader's doing the right thing, they're making disciples. It's really, to me, a successful leader is not someone who does just a great job while they're there, but they build an organization that continues far beyond them. Yeah. And the Lord had all this in plan. I truly believe, now I look back, it was for my family. It was for me. He had a plan for me, but I also truly believe he was doing this to give my children the opportunities to fulfill what he wanted them to do with their lives.
So did anything ever become of them?
Yes. Yeah, I have 6 grandkids.
Yeah.
They're all 3 married. You see, my daughter, Ashley, she graduated from college, then went to work for us with one of our sales company, and she's you guys know her. She's a world-class salesperson.
Absolutely.
Well, she and a friend of hers and one of my sons started a company in 2017, and I'm now the CEO. They let me come on board after it started being successful.
Okay.
But
you cherry-picked that role. Then.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. I cherry-picked it. But that company was the 11th fastest growing company in the state of South Carolina in 2021. Sells Christian curriculum and literally anything that you need to run a Christian school. We promote Museum of the Bible. We sell curriculum. We're negotiating with some other companies to offer other services to Christian schools. Yep. Then my other son then that's Alan Morgan. Alan is a state house rep for Greer in South Carolina. Then my other son is Adam Morgan, and he married Megan Hamilton. If you've ever heard of Ron Hamilton, Patch the Pirate, Majesty Music. Adam now runs that ministry and has been running it full-time for 5 or 6 years. He went to USC Law School, got his law degree, kind of like you, and
but
passed
for
the bar.
The purpose of ministry and using it for the Lord. I mean, that's
what the Lord used it for.
Yeah.
He was planning on going into politics, and he passed the bar. The Lord totally changed his direction before he even started practicing and put him into Majesty Music.
And it's a useful skill. I mean, most Fortune 500 CEOs are trained attorneys. Only 50% of lawyers that graduate actually practice law actively. Most go into business at this point. And I think part of that's because the environment has gotten so technical and so layered with bureaucracy and compliance expectations that you just about have to think that way and be able to live in that world to be an effective leader that navigates all that. But you have 2 sons that are state representatives in South Carolina. You think that's ever happened before? I mean, you might be the most powerful man that ever lived in South Carolina.
I'm not, but we can't find it. We think it may have happened maybe in the late 1700s, early 1800s.
Wow.
We can't prove it. So I do claim to be, I told my wife she's, the only lady to have 2 sons, and I'm the only father probably to have 2 sons.
Pretty amazing.
And they're the Freedom Caucus, and they're creating quite a stir. They're very conservative, and I'm very proud of them.
The problem is, and gets into this, do it heartily. If you're doing something for the Lord mediocrely, if that's a word, with mediocrity, I'll change it.
There you
go. You'll have a nice little smooth sailing, no problem. It won't ruffle anybody's feathers. You can be kind of a milquetoast, nominal Christian, and just sort of float through business and community and life. But if you do something heartily for God, you will attract attention. And that attention is not always or maybe ever going to be the most comfortable and positive. You're gonna face opposition big time. And I think they're seeing that now as well, is that they're taking the right stand. They take it the right way. I mean, I've watched Adam on the floor in debates, and he's very amiable and gracious. They're not fire breathing fanatics, and yet the opposition is unhinged.
And
personal.
It is very personal.
Yeah.
It's interesting. We're getting text messages weekly now. They're getting text messages. It's like they'll pass a good bill and a text message will come out with some kind of a negative
Just find some way
connotation
to twist it.
And I think it's actually solidifying their base because, they're almost so crazy people don't believe it. But people are looking for fighters. People want people that will stand up and do right. And it is. Doing right. It's really interesting. Courage begets courage. And doing right, if you do right, God's going to protect you. Now, he may not protect you the way you want to be protected or the way you think you need to be protected, but he's going to protect you and he's going to take care of you, especially if you know you're doing right. And that's, we obviously have some very strong feelings about politics and how Christians' involvement in politics should be.
Sure.
But we also are very aware that our testimony is always, you've got to be very cautious. You do get mad. You do want to strike out. You do want to say things.
Oh, yeah.
But,
you want to defend yourself, and, we should defend the strength of our ideas, and we should defend the Lord's work. I mean, as an attorney, I was involved in defending the Lord's work all the time. And our religious liberty rights need to be defended. Everyone's religious liberty rights, not just ours. And yet, there's also a sense in which we don't want to spend all of our time defending ourselves against those attacks that are maybe probably the most hurtful, are the ones that are personal. And I think, yes, we have to live in such a way that our integrity speaks for itself. But, I just respect so much those that are willing to enter the political fray, because nothing brings out the worst in other people and the worst attacks, like conservative politics in particular, it seems like. And it's a little bizarre, isn't it? Because it's like, well, I'm not the one that changed. I mean, for a couple thousand years, we've been operating society this way with these core principles at stake. We protect children. That's kind of like what civilizations do. And yet now that's an attack on someone else's civil liberty rights to say such a thing.
And it's Republicans. That's the interesting thing. It's not Democrats. I mean, obviously, they're unhinged, but it's a different unhinged. These are Republicans that are these ads I'm telling you about are coming out from Republicans. It's pretty interesting. I actually saw something the other day. It was hard to believe. There was they want to do a women's sporting holiday in November. So it's for hunters, fishermen. And just recognize women that do that. And so they said that's great, but they put an amendment up that basically said, but for this holiday, if you're going to give awards or do other things, a woman has to be defined as a woman from birth, biological. The Republicans struck it down. They were offended that they would put that up, and we were shocked. That tells you the battle we're up. And this is really in a red state.
It's not a Republican-Democrat thing anymore. It's gone deeper than that ideologically. And my concern is the educational system is compounding the issue by raising up an entire generation that thinks this is normal. This is the new normal.
Right.
And, places like Maranatha, you mentioned BJU, we're doing our best to maintain a foundation on God's word, that there is such a thing as truth and that it matters to tell the truth, and that we can lie to each other to make yourself feel right. I mean, when your company was going through bankruptcy, you could just lie to everybody and say that financially things were going great,
right?
But that wasn't the truth. What they really needed to know was the truth, so that you could address it and deal with it and fundamentally meet the need. And that's what Christians do. We look at God's word and we say, what is the real problem of man? And what is God's design for man? And why is there a disconnect between these two things? Why are we not living according to God's design? And then you bring the story of the gospel that helps us to reconcile our fallen condition with a holy God that wants to have a relationship with us. And that message is very much viewed now not as a loving, gracious, life-saving message, but as hate speech. And that's what's so confounding, I guess, about where we find ourselves, and that this is the United States of America. I've traveled overseas. Maybe you've had the opportunity to do that. And in some ways, I sense more freedom to give the gospel overseas than I do sometimes in our own backyard.
Yeah, I agree with that.
You feel like, well, I don't want to offend anybody, or I'm not sure where they're coming from, or if this might, all of a sudden turn into an argument rather than just a good conversation.
Well, and that is why Maranatha is so important. That's why, Christian education is so important. I'm often wondering how soon it's going to be before they're on an all-out war to shut us all down. Eventually, they're going to figure out where are all these millions of people that are pushing back coming from. And it's Christians, but I believe it's Christian education because those kids are learning truth. They are learning a biblical worldview. They are being taught work ethic. I mean, there's so many, I was just talking to one of your students today, and I'm just like, you have such a huge advantage over the kids coming out of these other over these kids coming out of these other colleges. First of all, you get an opportunity like this.
Yeah.
But your education, you're developing self-discipline, and you're developing a work habit and a work ethic that most of your peers don't have. And the companies all want it.
And an others orientation.
Yeah.
That service orientation, that it's not just about my own career advancement or how I can use other people to achieve my own ends. And that's what employers are looking for. That's what the world needs. It's what makes a business thrive, is when you have people who are willing to invest and give of themselves and sacrifice when needed. And so I think that's really we talked about whatsoever, we talked about heartily, we talked about as to the Lord, and then this last part of the verse, the final quarter, is not unto men. The fear of man will hold us back quite a bit. I mean, we ought to be mindful of our testimony. And I don't think that, I don't care what anybody thinks is not really what that means.
Exactly. No, you're exactly right.
We want to have a good testimony, and we want to live with integrity.
That's just the way I am.
Oh, don't you love that?
God doesn't accept that.
No. He never leaves us where we are.
No.
And yet, at the same time, it's an issue of, no, I'm going to take the right stand the right way, but just because there's opposition, that's not going to stop me. And and also not for the accolades of men either, whether it's the arrows or the laurels. Either way, we have to be willing to accept that maybe God will ask us to do something that isn't popular. And then even when things are, so which is more dangerous, the failures or the successes? When you think about the big picture of your mission in life?
I don't know. I think they're equally dangerous, to be honest with you. I think it depends on your personality type. Some people, I think failures are more dangerous because failure leads to depression, leads to, I've failed personally. You stop looking to God. Self-doubt. And I think success for, a strong personality that likes accolades, I think success is the most dangerous because that feeds on it. And, they like me. And then you're willing to compromise everything to be liked. And that's what we see a lot in politics. That's one thing I constantly talk to the guys about. You've got to be careful because, even in what they're doing with the fighting, they're fighting this huge battle. But the accolades, they're getting a lot of accolades. They're catching the attention of a lot of people that like fighters. Well, that's great, but don't fight just to fight. Fight for what is right. Fight appropriately.
That person who's in love so much with the accolades is easy to manipulate. And I see that in politics as well, is that all of a sudden somebody who comes in with a purity of focus and vision is sort of bought by, whether there's actual money involved or whether it's just the fame and attention. And now the agenda is somebody else's agenda. And you start to wonder, how does this make sense with what they came in talking about? Because I don't see that anymore. And I appreciate men like your sons who know what they're about, who hold positions of status and power, but hold them loosely and allow the Lord to be the one to decide if they continue to have them or not. That fear of reelection and the need to please the masses in order to maintain power is something that corrupts as well along the way. So I appreciate them so much. I appreciate you and the heritage that you have created through your life of faithfulness. And I appreciate you being willing to take the time to meet with us and talk through some of these things. And I look forward to the next time. Thanks for joining us.
I've enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. On Mission is a production of Maranatha Baptist University. Subscribe to On Mission on Apple, Google, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Don't forget to leave a review, as this will help other growing leaders find these conversations. For information about our guests, previous episodes, and general information about On Mission or MBU, go to mbu.edu/podcast. Join us again next week as we examine what keeps leaders on mission.